joining me once again, everybody, where today we're dealing with people who are wrong on the interwebs. Again, it's recidivist offenders. Surprise, surprise. It's not Dr. Michael Greger. Again, surprise, surprise. Here is a question and answer session that not Dr. Michael Greger did on his treadmill, as he usually is wont to do, where he's talking about things and what he's saying is demonstrably, fundamentally, unequivocally incorrect. So we'll put him right where he's wrong, shall we? Let's carry on with that. Michael, tell us all about it, and we'll tell you where you're wrong. Off you go.
All right. Fernanda says, what is the ideal LDL?
Well, it's whatever your body sets it at. The LDL level in your body is under the control almost completely in the medium to long term. It's under the control of your genes. Those genes knowing when to turn on and off the production of the LDL transporter for cholesterol, and those genes have survived 13.8 thousand million years. They really know what they're doing, and we should leave those genes to it, frankly. So there's your answer. However, not Dr. Michael Greger. We'll probably have different ideas on it. The reason I'm referring to him as not Dr. Michael Greger is, sure, he's entitled to the honorific doctor because he qualified as a physician. However, Michael Greger has never in his life practiced medicine, not one single day. He's not a doctor. So we need to get that square in our heads. We need to be very, very careful about where we take our advice or information from, frankly. Okay, so not Dr. Michael Greger. Carry on with your answer to what is the ideal LDL.
Ideal LDL depends on whether or not you have been diagnosed with heart disease.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. It has no bearing whatsoever on what the ideal LDL level is. None. False.
You have not a lifetime LDL. Well, actually, a lifetime LDL under 100.
No. False. There is no evidence anywhere in any experimental study on human beings over any period of time conducted with any degree of scientific discipline or rigor that can support that ridiculous ideologically based nonsense anywhere. Sorry about that, not Dr. Michael Greger. It just does not exist, the evidence for that claim. That's your opinion, and it's based on ignorance and ideology. That ideology having been apparently handed down to you via the Church of Anorexia Vegana. Yes, that's right. That's right. Not Dr. Michael Greger is also a devotee of the vegan ideology, and as such that still further erodes his credibility to now what you should see as pretty much subterranean levels. Also, you need to know that Michael Greger is quite a bit younger than I am. Anyway, that's for another day.
Should protect you from heart disease. However, if you didn't figure this out until middle age and your LDL's too high.
See, the inability apparently to even spit out a cogent sentence. That sort of thing. Perhaps not Dr. Michael Greger's brain is starving for nutrient. Perhaps.
And you're trying to get it down to prevent heart disease.
But lowering your LDL will not prevent heart disease because LDL is not the cause of heart disease. Ergo, lowering it can have no effect on the incidence of heart disease or likelihood of heart disease in any given individual, actually. And there is no evidence anywhere that it does whatsoever. None. This is an ideology, a bought and paid for ideology. Guess who paid for it? Yes, that's right. The companies that make medications that lower it. Okay? Keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the money. Follow the ball.
Then 70 would be the target.
No, vastly too low. In fact, if anything, The one indication which we have, being associative data and nothing else, would be that you should take the largest associative data set ever collected as your gauge of association and not causality. But what you'll find is that the ideal total cholesterol is around about 220 milligrams per deciliter, which would often have the LDL at sort of 125 to 150 in the average individual, actually, not under 100. You'll see that as the LDL total level drops in the associative study here, which includes thousands of millions of data points from 168 countries and territories around the world, you'll find that there is a precipitous increase in mortality for all causes, and from heart disease specifically and cancer specifically and everything pretty much that are the big killers. All incidences of mortality go up as the cholesterol drops below 220. Okay, so that's the number that you should be looking at. 220 should be your basement total cholesterol, or an LDL somewhere between 125 and 150 minimum. Okay, that's what the evidence, such that it is, would suggest. And that's not causal evidence, that's associative, because there are no causal inferences anywhere in the literature. Okay, easy one. What's next?
If you already have heart disease, then the target draw in terms of secondary prevention to prevent the second heart attack drops down to like 30 to 50, or basically
absolute nonsense. LDL does not cause heart disease still, and lowering it will not impact on an individual person's risk in any way, shape, or form of developing secondary heart disease problems, not one jot, and there is no evidence extant anywhere in the literature to say otherwise. This is irresponsible, misanthropic disinformation of the highest order being put forward by a charlatan and also a pretender who is not a physician or an expert in cardiovascular pathophysiology. Okay? Neither is an expert in nutrition at all, or common sense. That's one of the other things that this gentleman clearly suffers from, a lack of basic common sense. Okay? Carry on there, Michael. You're doing a great job.
as low as possible.
No, nonsense. False. Misinformation.
So wait a second, could there be a harm of having cholesterol too low?
Yes. Increased incidence associatively with mortality from every major cause of mortality in the world. That would seem to be problematic potentially.
We didn't know until PCSK9 inhibitors came out. We have these new biologic injectable drugs which can drop people's cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, into the single digits.
So that will have no impact per se on heart disease incidence or risk at all.
And still not seeing any problems with hormone manufacture like testosterone, estrogen, or any other issues.
How about vastly increased mortality? How about that as a potential problem? Shall we look at that? No, let's just spout some cherry-picked nonsense that doesn't inform on the question at hand.
That have piled on. So only benefit as you go lower and lower.
No, there is no benefit to be had by lowering your LDL pharmacologically. None whatsoever.
But we don't, most people should not need drugs to get their LDL down. They just need.
No, most people should not attempt to moderate or change the natural expression of LDL in their blood at any given time. It's under the control of the genes, those genes knowing exactly what they are doing. Okay?
Need to cut out or cut down on the three things that increase one's cholesterol, and then
you don't need to do any such thing. We've covered this, Michael.
that is is saturated fat found.
No, you don't need to cut down on saturated fat. There is no evidence anywhere in the literature that saturated fat is even associated meaningfully with any increase in deleterious health outcomes over any period of time in human beings whatsoever, let alone a cause and effect relationship. So forget that idea. What's next?
Mostly in animal fats and junk. Trans fats found
Trans fats absolutely should be avoided, apparently.
almost exclusively now in animal fat, now that's been removed from the food supply.
Yeah, but very, very little trans fat is to be found in animal products. So is that problematic? Well, if it was, it would show up in an associative prospective cohort look at any meaningful change in incidence of mortality or disease process in human beings over multiple decades, where there is decent control over how much meat was intaken or not by people. No such evidence is extant, no such inference exists, so you can't make the claim. Forget about it. That's gone too. What's next?
From partially addressing into oils. And third is dietary cholesterol found predominantly in eggs.
Nonsense. There is no need to avoid dietary cholesterol. Dietary cholesterol has very little impact on the expression of cholesterol in the blood of a person over intermediate, moderate term through the long term. Actually, it's under the control of your genes. Excess cholesterol taken in your diet that your body does not need will simply be excreted in the feces. Okay? Simple. What's next?
But throughout the animal kingdom. Just do all that, your cholesterol should drop right down. Add in a whole bunch of high fiber plant.
No, fiber is contraindicated in the human diet. It's associated with problems in the one and only one even slightly pseudo-clinical study that exists anywhere in the literature on this topic. In fact, with human beings as subjects under any kind of control or observation to speak of whatsoever. It's absolutely unequivocal, that one study, and that one study suggests very, very clearly that the inference is we ought to avoid fiber. Okay, what's next?
Foods, which is, say, whole plant foods, and you can...
Plants are not food for human beings, though, Michael. Human beings have evolved over at least the last 4.5 million years, eating a diet consisting almost entirely of the flesh and fat associated with that flesh of large ruminant animals mostly. Almost no plant material to speak of. We are not evolved for it. It's not food for human beings. Food doesn't poison us. Plants do. Okay?
And push cholesterol down even further. I have an LP little a video up.
Yeah, and it's full of disinformation, nonsense, pseudoscience, ill discipline, lack of understanding of the issues at hand. Once again, Michael Greger is not an expert in cardiovascular pathophysiology, nor medicine, because he's never been a physician in his life, nor nutrition, because he has no training in that to speak of at all whatsoever, probably about 2 or 3 hours during his general physician's rotation of the training that he undertook before he decided to actually not be a physician ever. Not a good source of information on this topic. Not worth listening to.
I think if I have another one coming up. I was just looking at that for the book.
Wow, by the way. Wow. It really is worrying. Really is very worrying, isn't it? Carry on there, Michael. You're doing great, son.
But I go through exactly where we should have a target LP little a and what we can do about it.
Yeah, but it's based on misinformation, fundamental nonsense, ideology, propaganda, smoke and mirrors, fearmongery. There's no science in your video whatsoever. There's nothing in existence that can support your ridiculous claims about LP little a, because it doesn't exist. I know that because, well, Michael, one of us is an expert in cardiovascular pathophysiology, and one of us is you. All right?
Yes, in addition to eating healthy, there are a few foods, particularly, that may lower LP little a further.
Yeah, but there's no need to do that. So why would we care what foods are associated with a tendency to express LP little a in that way? There's no value in it, so you might as well save your breath.
I think those are...
Oh, you think? That's rich.
Black cumin seed and flax seeds. But check the video.
Yeah, and there are no oxalates and other such toxins in those seeds, are there, Michael? Wow.
To find it.
Perhaps you should look up oxalate and see what that will do to a human body over time, Michael, as regards the likelihood of, well, all sorts of disease processes, including heart disease. Okay?
Yeah. Okay. Jesse has natural low HDL with a whole plant-based diet. LDL and triglycerides plummeted. Fantastic. But it talks about a triglyceride to HDL ratio. What's important number to track? LDL is the important number to track. We used to think HDL, so-called good cholesterol, was good. And actually,
there is no such thing as good and bad cholesterol. HDL is not cholesterol, by the way, Michael, and neither is LDL. Cholesterol is cholesterol. It only comes in one form. Go and look in any textbook you like of biochemistry. Wow, by the way. Whew. Whew. Wow. Yeah, go and look in any textbook you like and you'll find there's only one form of cholesterol that you'll find in animals, not two, so you can't have a good one and a bad one. All right?
Actually had benefits in terms of reducing disease risk. It turns out that...
No. Risk is informed by experimental intervention in a laboratory situation with human beings as subjects over an extended period of, multiple decades, actually. Are there any such studies that exist, Michael? No, there aren't. So you can't inform on risk at all. There are no studies that inform on risk.
That is not the case, based on a whole range of evidence.
A whole range of evidence. Would you like to cite some evidence ever, Michael, on anything? I wonder why you don't. Well, I don't wonder why you don't. I know why you don't. It's because it does not exist, and you are making things up to suit your ideology, your spin doctrine, your propaganda, your fearmongery, and your false assertion that you are a physician, because you're not.
Including drugs that raise HDL, which actually had to be stopped early because it was killing people.
It's almost as if you shouldn't intervene with your normal, natural, biologically, genetically set expressions of levels of various proteins in your body, including the lipoproteins, either high or low density, and with all the various apoproteins that are involved as well. It's almost as if the body's got this sorted out. It's been doing it for, well, at least 4.5 million years with humans in a format exactly as we are now, or indeed very similar, up to about 4.5 million years ago in proto-humans. Perhaps we should leave our genes to sort this out. They really do have it sorted, Michael, and you really don't. Okay?
And probably most importantly, these so-called Mendelian randomization studies.
So-called. They're not randomization studies at all. These are self-selected, or by definition, by operational definition, selected sub-cohorts of people that are inherently not phenotypically similar, not genotypically similar at the outset. There are multiple confounds, collinearities, covariates that render any such studies totally unable to inform us on cause and effect any more than any other form of associative study. They look technical and scientific-y because of the genetics that's involved, the genetic testing and stuff, which fools charlatans like yourself, Michael, into believing that this is any better than any other form of associative, non-experimental, non-scientific work. It doesn't. Sorry about that. What is next?
Where people who just genetically at birth, born with genes that give them kind of unnaturally elevated HDL throughout their entire lives, regardless of what they eat or how they live, do not actually have lower cardiovascular disease. However, those born with high LDL die early because...
Yes, and I wonder why that is. Do you have the answer, Michael? Because in a human body, what you're going to find is that there are basically an infinite number of degrees of freedom which may impact on the outcomes of someone's longevity. How are you going to tease out the exact contribution of something like, for example, LDL, a protein expressed by the human body according to the genetic instructions in that human body? those genes being interactive with the environment in which they find themselves at any given time. Because if you look at the so-called Mendelian randomizations, which are not random, and you look at the characteristics of those populations at baseline and throughout the follow-up period, you will find that those populations, the non-SNP carriers and the SNP carriers, are vastly, grossly different at the outset. That's not an experimental study. That's not science. That cannot give us any inference on any potential role of LDL causally in any disease process of any kind, let alone anyone's longevity. We are done. What is next?
From cardiovascular disease, and those born with low LDL are protected from...
No, they're not protected in any way, shape, or form. You're talking about incidence rates as not even observed by the populations because they attempt to adjust the outcome statistics on the basis that they've controlled nothing whatsoever. They use a technology that they call multiple regression analysis to achieve that. It's completely invalid, scientifically unjustifiable. It's scientific misconduct of the highest order. Here's what a scientist does, Michael. They set up an experiment. They control all the variables in the first instance before they collect their data. They then collect their data on the basis of their one and only one degree of freedom that's allowed to be varying between the two populations, and they report what they actually did observe in that case. Okay? These epidemiologists, these Mendelian folks, do no such thing. They control nothing whatsoever. They collect all data, irrespective of all the confounds, collinearities, covariates, things that absolutely destroy the validity of the observations. Then they take those observations that they've made, screw them up, throw them over the right shoulder into the ash can, and make up some different ones to suit themselves on the basis of an assertion that multiple regression analysis is able to petition out causality, which it isn't. Multiple regression is no more capable of informing on cause and effect than single-variate regression is. We are done, Michael. Okay? Forget about your Mendelian nonsense. It is not science. It does not establish cause and effect or even infer cause and effect. Okay? It's hypothesis generating. All right? What's next?
Heart disease, regardless of what they eat, proving that...
regardless of what they eat. So they follow these people for their whole lifetimes, do they, Michael? And they know exactly what these people did in fact eat? Or did they just ask them once to fill out a survey saying, what do you typically eat? Which was it, Michael? Which one of those would be relatively scientifically robust, and which would show, once again, another reason why such studies are complete and utter hogwash?
Effectively proven, of course, we can actually...
No, prevent is a cause and effect statement. There are no studies that can inform on cause and effect, so the word prevent here is totally inappropriate. Wrong again, Michael. Wow. Whew. Absolutely, people, if you'd like to take health advice from Michael Greger, being, a significant amount younger than I am, as he is, or perhaps you'd like to take it from me instead, make your choice. Choose now, or later, but now is better than later to make your correct choice on who it is you should listen to for advice on any aspect of health. Right, what's next?
Actually, real proving in terms of randomized controlled trials, but it's the best in terms you get for observational data, which show that LDL is actually a...
if somebody would like to, just for fun, watch through this video again later and take account of how many times Michael Greger says in the video, and give us that number just purely out of morbid interest. That'd be great. Thanks.
A risk factor, not just...
He's clearly gone to the Milton Mills School of Public Speaking, hasn't he? Good job, Milty. You've done well. Michael, on the other hand...
a correlate. So, for example, I had to do a video talking about this HDL thing. It's one of my egg videos where something like having lots of what was it, tennis?
Oh my God! Really, Michael? Really? Look, anybody that takes this bloke remotely seriously and thinks he's a good source of information and advice, good luck to you. That's Darwin in action, folks. You just go ahead, you do exactly that. Wow.
Issues in your house associated with better health, but that's not because gym shoes actually help your health directly. It's just a proxy for something like exercise, which actually does help your health. So those people that.
So why don't you apply that same logic to your ridiculous lipoprotein argument, Michael? Because the same rule applies. Association cannot inform on cause and effect, and does not inform on cause and effect.
Who carry around cigarette lighters probably live shortened lives, but not because they're carrying around cigarette lighters. It's not a cause and effect, a causal risk factor. And similarly, HDL is not a causal protective factor for heart.
And neither is LDL a causative factor in heart disease. The same rule applies on both sides of the coin, Michael. This is not hard to understand, even if you are a complete imbecile. And I use the terms even if advisedly in your case. Okay?
Heart disease. So don't worry about your HDL. Worry about your LDL.
No, don't, because the same rule applies on that side of the coin as well. Your LDL is no more causative as a risk factor in heart disease than HDL is protective in some way, because neither is true.
It's wonderful that they're down. And
no, it isn't. Lowered LDL is probably a sign of bad things rather than good things, actually.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
No, it isn't fantastic.
Okay, Francis says, what is the main reason why one's A1C fluctuates from high to low and high to low? That is, will a B12 supplement help with diabetic neuropathy? Okay.
Well, the reason that a diabetic person's A1C goes all over the place, up and down, is because their blood sugar control from day to day, from moment to moment, and hour to hour is also vastly ill-controlled, poorly controlled. There is a dysfunction in their ability to control their blood glucose level as a function of their body doing what it should do, i.e., working against vastly increasing the level of sugar in the cells, which would be damaging and problematic, combined with that person's completely inappropriate diet, which contains any amount of carbohydrate-producing material of any kind, i.e. plants, Michael. The way to solve someone's diabetic issue is to remove plants from their diet and all sources of carbohydrates to speak of. Do that progressively, of course, over 6 to 8 weeks. Don't change your diet markedly overnight. That's a bad idea. Change it slowly, but get yourselves onto a fully carnivorous diet. And if you are an insulin-dependent diabetic, you need to do that in concert with your healthcare provider to make sure that your insulin is adjusted accordingly. All right? There's the answer to your diabetes question. That will leave you with a much more stable, much better controlled A1C across time, and indeed that will show up as much better glucose control on a CGM, should you decide to go on one of those for a bit to check what I'm saying is correct, because it is. Okay.
Those of you who are like, what is an A1C? It is a measure of kind of long-term blood sugar control.
No, moderate term, around about 90 days, give or take, Michael, not long-term at all. So you don't even know that. Dear.
For the last few months or so.
Right, well, that's not long-term. Long-term is multiple decades. Okay, not several months.
But really biased towards kind of more recent events. And so the main reason is people are eating different foods. And although women can get hormonal changes throughout the month, that even if they're eating the same thing, they can have different blood sugar responses. So that could be one reason.
It's not just women that suffer that. Women are more, perhaps, shall we say, susceptible to such things, Michael, sure. But you're now proposing there, by lack of a clear statement to the contrary, that men don't suffer that. Yes, they do.
If you're sick, you have really high blood pressures, even if...
Wow, this is almost impossible to listen to, isn't it?
if you're kind of eating healthy. But typically, we tend to think of HbA1c as in terms of diabetic control and how well medications are working. And
see, there you go, suggesting that medications are the answer to diabetic control. No. Goodness gracious. If you're insulin dependent, there is one so-called medication which will be a part of your management of your disease process, that being exogenous insulin, as is appropriate, as dictated by your diet. But the most important factor is your diet. Okay?
for prediabetes or in general, it's typically what's happening with the diet. Primarily the glycemic load of different foods, and so I encourage people to cut out
things that dump glucose into the bloodstream, which is what, Michael, by the way? Plants. Plants are where carbohydrates come from in any meaningful amount whatsoever. And yet you promote a diet which is rich in plant material. Do you see the problem with this, Michael? It's clear that you don't, or your ideology doesn't allow you to see that. Nonetheless, that's a problem, isn't it?
refined grains and things that...
You said glycemic load. The glycemic load of a whole grain and a refined grain, Michael, is precisely equivalent. They are the same number. You don't even know that. Goodness gracious. Incredible, by which I mean entirely lacking in credibility, not Dr. Michael Greger. What's next?
cause too high of a blood sugar spike.
Blood sugar spiking has nothing to do with glycemic loading. It has to do with glycemic index, which is another measure altogether. It's also invalid scientifically. I've shown that before on my fine, actually science-based channel. Perhaps people should go and educate themselves as to why the glycemic index is not a scientifically valid or robust measurement of anything, and as such, the assertions made under the glycemic index argument are also therefore invalid. I invite you to check that video out. It's great.
Okay, Santanu says, with plant-based diet, reduce sugar substantially. I want to know, how do I reduce insulin resistance? Great.
Insulin resistance is a construct, Michael. It's a concept. It can't be measured, ergo it can't be reduced. There is no company anywhere in the world manufacturing an insulin resistance meter that you can buy and apply to measure someone's insulin resistance. Precisely because insulin resistance is a construct, an idea, not a physiological response that can be measured, ergo does not exist. Okay? You need to learn about why it is that someone would be more or less able to absorb sugar from their bloodstream into their cells at any given time on the basis of the evil machinations and workings. I say evil with a great deal of tongue-in-cheek because it actually is the thing that keeps you alive. It's called the Randall cycle. It's an acute response which can become chronic if it's chronically activated in the wrong way. But that's not insulin resistance. Neither is it pathological. That's not the thing that needs ameliorating. If someone has a problem with their blood sugar control, the thing that needs ameliorating is the amount of carbohydrate and plant material that person is pouring down their neck on a daily basis. It should be more like none. Okay? Right, what's next?
Fasting insulin is 16, looking to reduce it. HDL has gone down. We don't worry about HDL because it's not a causal risk factor for heart disease.
Neither is LDL, remember?
But if you want to reduce your insulin resistance...
Well, how are we going to do that? How do you reduce a construct? You're talking about someone's insulin level in their blood, which is affected by, well, several things. One, the rate at which insulin is being added to the bloodstream, and two, the rate at which insulin is becoming inactive and exiting the bloodstream in an effective form. Nothing to do with anything else. Resistance, you say? No, insulin may not be having the effect on a cell or a series of cells or the tissues at large that you might want it to, precisely because those cells have other mechanisms inside of those cells, the Randall cycle, preventing those cells from absorbing that sugar from the bloodstream precisely in order to protect those cells from damage that they would suffer were that sugar allowed to pour into those cells according to its concentration gradient. Normal, natural, physiologically indicated, part of the genetic instructions that exist inside all the cells of your body. Remember those genes having survived something like 13.8 billion years, Michael. Okay? Good.
You decrease the cause of insulin resistance, which is excess saturated fat intake.
Nonsense. Absolute rubbish. Go and learn the Randall cycle, Michael Greger. Go and learn anything, Michael Greger, actually, anything at all on any topic. Because every single thing I have ever seen come out of your mouth in the last 5 years that I've been aware of your existence has been false, demonstrably false, dangerous, contraindicated disinformation, malpractice if you actually were a physician, which you're not. Okay? Absolutely disgraceful conduct. False again.
In the context of a hypercaloric diet, or excess visceral adiposity. If your waist measured at your belly button is more than half your height, you need to lose weight to reduce that visceral fat and
No, in that case you need to lose fat, not weight. They're not the same thing, Michael.
decrease insulin resistance regardless of what you eat.
Nope, not insulin resistance because it's still a construct. It still doesn't exist. What you need to do is deactivate the Randall cycle. And the most effective, predictable, and rapid means to achieve that is to stop eating carbohydrates, period.
Okay, BLK says, type 2 diabetic. Oh, but eating healthy, wonderful.
No, a whole food plant-based diet is not healthy. That is a contraindicated, damaging, ultimately health-destroying diet for human beings, precisely because it is not in line with your genetic gift, your organ system design, your anatomy, your physiology, or anything else. That diet will leave you with your health in pieces at some point. Mark my words. So no, that's not healthy.
Not on meds, fantastic. Oh, but can't get glucose under control.
There you go. It's almost as if the diet's wrong in some way. Oh, that's right. It's wrong in every way. Case in point. What's next?
And so one of the reasons may be you're suffering insulin resistance from
No, still wrong.
excess visceral fat.
How do you know? Is there any information there about that person's visceral adiposity, Michael? Or are you completely guessing?
So if you have excess abdominal fat,
Oh, what if that person doesn't? Then what?
it can spill fat in your bloodstream. And so even if you don't have it going into your mouth, you still have these high levels of fat in your blood, and that interferes with insulin responsiveness.
As it should do, according to the Randall cycle, precisely in order to protect your cells from glycation damage, encoded for in the genes, absolutely indicated, part of a 13.8 billion year process of evolution. Michael, yes, good.
In your muscles and liver, and that's what causes type 2 diabetes, especially.
No, it isn't. The cause of type 2 diabetes is pouring carbohydrates down your neck. Type 2 diabetes is elevated blood glucose, nothing else. That is how it is diagnosed. That is what the pathology is. That is what needs ameliorating, and the means by which to do that is to stop pouring carbohydrates down your neck. Period. Full stop. End of discussion. Goodness gracious.
When it offloads fat to your poor pancreas and can destroy some of your insulin-producing cells.
No, it's an immune dysfunction that causes the destruction of beta cells in the pancreas of someone who is type 1 diabetic. Michael, there are many things that can set off an immune dysfunction. Many things indeed. Fat is the least likely of them.
And so weight loss would be...
So we're still going to just guess this person's overweight, are we? On a whole food, plant-based diet, that's actually quite likely. Either that or emaciated, Michael. Those are the two. There's not really anybody in the middle. Okay?
The next step, and if your glucose is not under control, you should indeed talk to your doctors about being on meds until...
or you should sort your diet out by getting some advice from someone who knows the first thing about what they're talking about, and that is not Dr. Michael Greger. Okay?
Something like metformin until you can get it under control with diet, though it may take weight loss to...
Which again, you're just guessing. That person might be emaciated rather than overweight. That's the other likely outcome of a whole foods plant-based diet. Very much tongue-in-cheek, whole food, plant-based, no, because that's an oxymoron. Food for human beings is the flesh and fat of large ruminant animals, mostly. The rest is other animals. The space for plants in the human diet? No.
Drop your visceral fat to levels that you're where...
Oh, well, spit it out, Michael. Seriously, son. Wow. You really are battling, aren't you? With reality, with cognitive dissonance, with Dunning-Kruger, with a serious ego problem, and with delusions of grandeur. Incredible.
Your insulin resistance drops enough that you can reverse your diabetes.
So there you go. Not Dr. Michael Greger being wrong about everything. Join me next time when someone else will be wrong about everything, but not nearly as wrong as not Dr. Michael Greger, and probably not quite as irritating, depending on who it is that's wrong, because there are a lot of irritating wrong people, aren't there? Thanks for sticking with me. And we'll leave you with this final thought from not Dr. Michael Greger. If you don't eat your fruits and vegetables, you might die. Sorry, I was just overtaken there by the spirit of not Dr. Greger for a second. I'm okay now. Join me next time. See you then. Ciao.